Assalamu alaikum. This is Talk to Farina Najam from Division of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Education, Lahore. The course title is Portrait Painting. Dear student, I would like to share about the history of portrait painting. Introduction. First of all, what is portrait? A portrait is a painting, photograph, sculpture, or other artistic representation of a person in which the face and its expression is predominant. The intent is to display the likeness, personality, and even the mood of the person. Portrait painting. Portrait painting is a genre in painting where the intent is to represent a specific human subject. Portraitists may create their work by commission for public and private persons, or they may be inspired by admiration or affection for the subject. History of portrait painting. The portrait has been a major part of art history. They have existed since ancient times and their importance within the art world still remains. For as long as there has been painting, there has been portraiture. Portrait paintings date back to at least 5,000 years ago to ancient Egypt, where the art forms is said to have originated, although many other ancient peoples also practice portrait artistry. Before the invention of photography, a painted, sculpted, or drawn portrait was the only way to record the appearance of someone. But portraits have always been more than just a record. They have been used to show the power, importance, virtue, beauty, wealth, taste, learning, or other qualities of the sitter. Portraits are defined by the Tate Modern Museum as simply a representation of a specific person. 55 to 79 AD. AD means after Anno Domini. Ancient portrait murals from Pompeii. Pompeii is the name of the city of Rome, have been well preserved for almost 2,000 years by lava and ashes. One of the most famous is titled Terentius Nero and his wife. 985 AD. During the Renaissance and Middle Ages, portrait artistry began to take on a new form rather than highly realistic features of their subjects. Artists of this time tended to create portraits with stereotypical facial expressions, means sad facial expression, flat backgrounds, and a lack of realism. 1503 AD. Leonardo da Vinci. In 1503 AD, Leonardo da Vinci created perhaps the most iconic portrait of modern art history, the Mona Lisa. Leonardo used a different technique than many other painters of this time. Instead of hard and very realistic lines, Leonardo da Vinci used soft and blended brushstrokes, while the Mona Lisa is an incredible painting with her playful smirk and expressive eyes. During this era, only the wealthy, powerful, and those with status could afford a portrait painting. Paints and canvas were hard to come by and had to be made by apprentices in a studio. Another work of Leonardo, John Vermeer. Portraits in Vermeer's day were symbols of social position commissioned by individuals who had the power to dictate the artist's vision. They could be used to convey such things as wealth, status, or religious merit. Utilizing the technique of underpainting or a monochromatic ground, Vermeer made the girl with the pearl earring seem to lift from the canvas. Through careful use of his palette, he created the deep, rich tones of the girl headdress and gown. Then, to give her skin a glowing appearance, he used pigments to create light and shadow effects that contrasted against the dark background. Durer. Durer was without doubt the greatest artist of the Northern Renaissance. Durer was one of the first to create self-portraits as a visual notebook of his life. He was only 13 years old when he drew his first self-portrait. As a 22-year-old, after completing his formal artistic training, he painted himself as a young man. Durer went on to paint and engrave several more self-portraits through his 20s. At age 28, Durer painted his most confident and his most famous self-portrait. Posing frontally before a black background, the artist is shown with curled lock that flow over a fur-trimmed coat, which he pulls closed with a particularly meaningful hand gesture, that of Christ's blessing. Self-portrait 1493. Oil on panel. In this painting, Durer painted himself as a gentleman, dressed in light-toned clothes and looking his best. He wears an open black and white doublet with a striped cap in the same colors and undershirt trimmed with gold and a silk coat of blue and white threads holding up a grey-brown cloak that falls over his right shoulder. The artist chose a half-length, three-quarter format with two focuses of attention, the face and hands. Self-portrait 1500. Self-portrait at 28 is a panel painting by Albert Dürer. Painted early in 1500, just before his 29th birthday. It is the last of his 3 painted self-portraits. Art historians consider it the most personal, iconic, and complex of his self-portraits. The self-portrait is most remarkable because of its resemblance to many earlier representations of Christ. Art historians note the similarities with the conventions of religious painting, including its symmetry, dark tones, and the manner in which the artist directly confronts the viewer and raises his hand to the middle of the chest, as if in the act of blessing. The placement of the inscriptions in the dark field on either side of Dürer. Dürer are presented as if floating in space, emphasizing that the portrait has a highly symbolic meaning. Its somber mood is achieved through the use of brown tones set against the plain black background. The lightness of touch and tones seen in his earlier two self-portraits has been replaced by a far more introverted and complex representation. Rembrandt. Through his prolific career, Rembrandt worked in a number of genres, but he is most famous for portraits and for depictions of biblical and mythological scenes. He is renowned as the master of light and shadow, and his paintings are of exceptional realism due to his trademark light and shadow effects. He is also considered one of the greatest self-portrait artists, and he has made around 50-60 portraits of himself. Portraits were an important component to his artwork. Rembrandt created self-portraits throughout his prolific career. Indeed, he created nearly 100 renderings of himself from his early days as an artist until the year of his death, including some 40 paintings, 30 etchings, and a handful of drawings. Rembrandt always pictured himself in front of a simple backdrop, and often from the torso up. By the following decade, he favored presenting himself in hat, such as a black velvet cap that appears in more than one of his paintings. Upon reached middle age, Rembrandt depicted himself naturally and honestly, with wrinkles and graying hair. His work, a young lady smiling. Portrait of John VI, 1654. He was a wealthy merchant and an important cultural figure in the Dutch Golden Age. He was also a close friend and patron of Rembrandt. This portrait captures the moment as Six passes while putting on his gloves just before leaving his house. Rembrandt uses powerful strokes to brilliantly display the hands, the gloves, and the red cloth. But it is the face on which he worked and reworked that is responsible for the fame of the portrait, as he has been able to capture a marvelous expression of momentary abstraction. Rembrandt is regarded as one of the greatest portrait artists. Rembrandt's self-portraits are known for him not showing any mercy to himself, and this painting, which was painted when he was 50 years old, showcases his sincere depiction of himself. The most luminous area showcases his face. The artist is wearing a large cap and his collar is turned up. Hence, the name Rembrandt is regarded as one of the greatest artists in the genre of self-portraiture. And this painting is his most famous self-portrait. His work, another. Self-portrait at the age of 63. This work was painted in the final year of Rembrandt's life, and as one of his last pictures. Rembrandt painted more self-portraits than any other artist of the 17th century. In this late picture, the artist wears a deep red coat and his hands clasped before him. Jan Van Eyck. Vincent van Gogh. Post-Impressionist painter, Van Gogh loved to paint himself. We call that a self-portrait. He never smiled in his portraits. He was usually in a sad mood. He used dark lines and white brushstrokes to show sadness. Van Gogh loved to paint himself. He was specially known for broad brushstrokes, brilliant color, no mixing, straight from the tube. Straight from the tube, swirling lines to show movement and strong emotion and to bring his subject to life. His work, Van Gogh presented himself in this self-portrait as a painter, holding a palette and paintbrushes behind his easel. He showed that he was a modern artist by using a new painting style with bright, almost unblended colors. The palette contains the complementary color pairs red, green, yellow, purple, blue, orange. He let these pairs down side by side to intensify one another. The blue of his smock for intense and the orange red of his beard. Henri Matisse. He became known as a leader in Fauvism, and in 1905 he exhibited together with other Fauve painters. His work, this constantly changing aesthetic approach is evident in his series of self-portraits which he painted from the age of 15 until 90. In 1901, he entered his blue period, a phase in which he painted somber, stylized scenes in cool blue tones, as evident in his striking self-portrait from the same year. Following his blue period, Picasso's work began to show primitive influences. He also began to use a warmer color palette of pinks during his rose period, and in 1907 his well-known Cubist stage began. As apparent in his self-portrait of the same year, this style incorporates geometry, fractured forms, and thick black lines. His work, at the age of 15, and he was 18 years old, 20 years old. And this work was painted after the suicide of one of Picasso's close friends and marked the beginning of what is called his blue period. His face is deathly white and he looked a lot older than he was. He was painted himself the way he felt lonely, isolated, and measurable. The mood of a painting can be strongly influenced by its colors. His work when he was 24 years old, 25 years old. 6 years old. He was 83 years old. 85. 89 years old. 90. His self-portraits. 90 years old. Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo was a Mexican self-portrait artist who began painting mostly self-portraits after he was severely injured in a bus accident. Kahlo later became politically active and married fellow communist artist Diego Rivera in 1929. He exhibited her paintings in Paris and Mexico before her death in 1954. Are saying, I paint self-portraits because I am so often alone, because I am the subject I know best. From battle with her mind and her body, Kahlo lived through her art. In many of Kahlo's self-portraits, she is accompanied by monkeys, dogs, and parrots, all of which she kept as pets. Since the Middle Ages, small spider monkeys like those kept by Kahlo have been said to symbolize the devil, finally coming to represent the fall of man, vice, and the embodiment of lust. Kahlo again depicts herself with her monkey in both 1939 and 1940, in a later version in 1945. Kahlo paints her monkey and also her dog. Self-portrait. The frontal position and outward stare of Kahlo in this self-portrait directly confronts and engages the viewer. In this painting, Frida Kahlo frequently employed flora and fauna in the background of her bust-length portraits to create a tight space. Typically a symbol of good fortune, the meaning of a dead hummingbird is to be reversed. Kahlo, who craves flight, is disturbed by the fact that the butterflies in her hair are too delicate to travel far, and that the dead bird around her neck has become an anchor preyed upon by the nearby cat. In failing to directly translate complex inner feelings, it as though the painting illustrates the artist's frustrations. The wounded deer, this painting, as a hybrid between a deer and a woman. The innocent Kahlo is wounded and bleeding, preyed upon and hunted down in a clearing in the forest. Staring directly at the viewer, the artist confirms that she is alive, and yet the arrows will slowly kill her. The artist wears a pearl earring as though highlighting the tension that she feels between her social existence and the desire to exist more freely alongside. This painting shows a self-portrait of the artist and her spider monkey. Fulong Chang, a symbol employed as a shirling, as a surrogate for the children that she and Abra could not have. The arrangement of figures in the portrait signals the artist's interest in Renaissance paintings of the Madonna and Child.